Is it going to be the last deal? We don't know. Are there going to be future exchanges, either with Hamas or with other terror groups, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or the warlords who actually hold some of the hostages? Everything is still open, and we might expect future release of hostages, either through deals, either through military operation, or just Hamas will unilaterally, as a result of political pressure, will release some of the hostages.
Give us a sense, if you will, of how these negotiations actually work on the ground. Clearly, in this situation, you have involvement from the Qataris, but give us a sense of the practicalities and the logistics around it.
Well, each context is quite different. You mentioned the word how these negotiations are conducted on the ground, and I would say that in the past, there were mediators. In the big Shalit deal, Gilad Shalit 2009, there was a German mediator who actually went in and out from Gaza, dealing directly with then the Hamas heads. This time, it doesn't work like that. This time, because of the magnitude, because of the context, the number of hostages, the involvement, the very cruel, barbaric Hamas leadership, we see a set of mediators, U.S., Qatari, Egyptians, and usually it works through messages conveyed by Israel through the U.S. with the U.S. assistance of the Qatari. The Qatari communicate with the Hamas leadership in Qatar and Hamas leadership in Gaza through different means of communication. The Egyptians are informed, the Egyptians are involved. To some extent, the Egyptians are the one who will be executing or facilitating the execution through the Rafah crossing point. In business negotiations, you agree that you will deliver a certain service, and then you start to ask when exactly you will deliver, what exactly the scope of the service, assuming it was not defined in the agreement. And here you say a ceasefire. Israel will stop intelligence surveillance. So by which means? And then Hamas says, we want your tanks not to move during the ceasefire. So Israel probably say, tanks are not firing, tanks are moving in different positions. So, for example, you say Hamas or Palestinians will be allowed to move during and will not be subject to bombing or threats. And Hamas says, okay, we interpret this as will be allowed to move back to the northern part of Gaza. So the essence of this hostage negotiation or crisis negotiation is always in the details. One of the most unfortunate, famous failures was in 2003 in this horrific case of Beslan, where Chechen terrorists had school kids. The Russian security forces agreed on a certain procedure to evacuate the wounded kids, but didn't really finalize all the details. So when they went with ambulances, the Chechen terrorists interpreted this as an assault and start firing, and then everything collapsed, and we ended up with hundreds of kids injured, so casualties or dead. So this type of negotiations are very delicate. Of course, no trust between or among all the parties involved, Israelis, Hamas, Qatar, Egypt. So everything is very sensitive and need to be detailed. And once you conduct these negotiations through third parties and emissaries, everything takes much more time.
How much more complicated is it in that it appears as though the hostages are divided into several areas in Gaza and being held by different groups? The majority may be being held by Hamas, but there could be hostages being held by Palestinian Islamic Jihad and potentially even Gazan citizens.
We know, and that adds to the complexity on various levels. We know that Hamas, as you mentioned, Hamas holds most of them. Islamic Palestinian Jihad claim to have 30, 40, including kids and children and women. And the warlords, the Palestinian gangs who came brutally after the first wave of raids and took hostages, young people, men, women, and that adds complexity on two levels. First, on the level of the deal itself. What is agreed? According to the agreement right now, Hamas will committed to free 50 hostages. Probably this is the number of kids and women which Hamas has in its possession. And then the agreement says that if they want additional days of ceasefire, they will get another day of ceasefire for each 10 individuals, 10 hostages that they will bring. Probably Hamas will take advantage and try to collect them from the other groups. How Hamas is going to do that? Still unclear. What are the leverage that Hamas has on the Palestinian Islamic Jihad? Still unclear. Whether Hamas can get and give something in return to these warlords? Still unclear. So many significant hurdles and uncertainties in execution.
Will the deal include things like provisions for the Red Cross to see the hostages that Hamas have taken and assess their health, their medical needs, and their general state of mind? Because a lot of families in Israel are waiting for any information whatsoever about their loved ones. They haven't heard anything as to whether they're dead or alive, and if they're alive, what condition they're in.
If you ask my professional opinion, I doubt that the Hamas will allow the Red Cross to visit and provide medication and support to the remaining hostages. And of course, the Red Cross will not insist on doing it, because in the balance of power within the Gaza Strip, the Red Cross, they don't insist on visiting the remaining hostages, unfortunately.
How soon after that point are hostages reunited with their loved ones, with their families?
Shortly after, they will go through medical examination, through immediate mental and welfare support. And those who need medical treatment or an additional medical treatment, they will be taken to Israeli hospitals. They will meet the families there. We have to remember that there are kids and children whose both parents were murdered. So they will unite the remaining of the family. Most of the hostages don't understand what happened. They don't know what happened. They don't know that they don't have homes to go back to. It is something which Israel never faced before. But we are strong people. We are doing it together, professionally, and I believe that the support that we see from the Israeli civil society in the last 6 weeks is something which will allow the hostages, when they will come back, to grow with as minimum as possible emotional, mental, physical damages.
Would you be confident that this would be a path forward in terms of there being future releases and a release of all of the living hostages, or could you see it potentially fade away if, as expected, the IDF continues its military operation?
The IDF will continue its military operation once the implementation, it was said by the Prime Minister, by the Minister of Defense, by Gantz, by everybody, by the commanders of the military. Why? because as you stated that at the beginning, Israel's goal is to dismantle Hamas military and governing capabilities and bring back the hostages. And the war and the work is not over until all the hostages will be back, either through military operation, through deals, or through international pressure. It will continue.